Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Hey guys, Amir Reiter here on the Sales Transformation Podcast with my guest, John Barrows. John, pleasure having you on today, man. How are you doing?
Good, brother. How you doing, man?
Doing good. I feel like I'm working hard transforming sales just like you. And then I think we've been in discussion for about 2 years. I think it was almost 2 years now that I was on your podcast. Thanks for having me on. A lot of people say that you can't measure an ROI with a podcast, but I was able to actually track on one of our most fundamentally changing clients from being on your podcast. So it's a small world, and I love what we're doing. So you've probably been asked this question like multiple times because we do on a lot of podcasts, but I'll ask it anyways. Is there something that you have not shared with any other person on the podcast that's an interesting fact about yourself, besides the fact that you're a king slayer of selling copy machines, that you would share with the world today?
Let's see. Something I haven't shared.
That's a hard one, right?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I've been interviewed a decent amount at this point and been asked some random ass shit. But, I think not a ton of people know that I worked for Jack Welch for a couple of months. So GE Jack Welch, Jack and Susie Welch, while they were getting their online MBA program off the ground, which was pretty cool. It was definitely a life learning experience there on that one. And then I think most people know, but I got fired from Staples after selling my first company to them because I just didn't fit in the corporate world, which is another reason I work for myself. And and how I deal with stress. People ask, I smoke a lot of weed, so those three things are probably decent. Decent, in fact, things to get to know me a little bit better.
Tom bien, as they say in Spanish.
Nice.
I'll call it out too. I love all those things. I'm like, I know about those stuff. I follow you deeply. The Staples thing, to me, I think it's almost a common play. I see that often, right? Where founders sell their company, they're held on for a year, and then they leave. I don't even know what you'd say because you didn't come to corporate. Probably could have just been a plan to begin with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've determined, and my team and I talk about this a lot, like, we're pretty much unemployable at this point because, once you really catch that bug of entrepreneurship and going off on your own, for me, I knew that corporate wasn't right early in my career. So like I had Xerox and Black & Decker and a few other things. And then I got into startups and I felt better. But then when we got acquired by Staples, I kind of assumed that was another kind of like, okay, cool. Like this is going to be an integration. I'm going to figure this out. I'm really interested. But I smashed into the corporate, bureaucracy and all that, to the politics and everything else. And it was like this visceral reaction. And even though I didn't quit, even though I should have. I absolutely should have. They fired me, and it was probably the best thing that probably happened in my career. The world is now open to me to do what I want to do. Forget about what I'm supposed to do. And I think too many people right now are stuck in the doing what they're supposed to do. Right?
I mean, I could talk about that forever.
Yeah,
doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah, I'm not going to get off topic. I would say that we're very similar, and that's kind of I think why we get along. I also worked in the corporate world, and I did sell a company, but I didn't work for the company. But then I worked for a company called NetSuite, where I was first exposed to software sales. And it was really, they want you to run the playbook, even if it's inefficient. Yep. And I literally probably could have worked 5 hours a week, and they would have been happier with that, paying me $180K than it was 40 hours a week of me actually trying to improve systems, right, and trying to give feedback. So it's not, I feel like the corporate job is designed for somebody who almost wants to do the ABC every day, that one motion every day. And if you're not prepared to do that one motion, entrepreneurship is probably the better vessel for you because then you're doing everything.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think it's all skill sets too. I mean, we all at a certain point in your career, you start to really figure out what you're good at and what you're not. And for me, I mean, look, it takes a very special skill set to learn how to play the politics of corporate world, right? And that is to me, it's an admirable skill set. Like for people who have figured out how to do what they want to do within the corporate structure and still maintain credibility, still maintain authenticity, and play that game, right? Because in corporate, you have to, if you're, rise up in your middle management or, executive, you have to obviously manage the people below you, but you also have to manage the people above you, right? So you have to play that. And very few people in the corporate world are able to, do both well. usually you're either a leader that is protecting your group from the shit that's from above, right?
Mhm.
And you take the shit. And that, therefore, people above you probably don't like you too much, so you're probably not going to get promoted, up to a certain level. Or the vice versa, you kiss ass to everybody who's above you, and therefore the people below you think you're a chump, right? So it takes a special skill set to learn how to play both sides of that equation, and I just don't have that skill set. Like I don't have a filter. I really don't like politics at its core. I
Yeah.
mean, I was part of a local town hall meeting where we're trying to, fight this development that's going up around around our house or whatever it is. And I'm sitting there listening to this, and like everything about this thing was all policy and procedure, and you have the floor for 5 minutes and you can't interrupt that person, and the whole time I'm like cringing because every fiber of my being was to just interrupt him and be like, whatever you're talking about is total horseshit right now. Like, this is literally a waste of time what you're discussing, and let me talk, but like that's why I'm not in politics. That's why I'm not in corporate America. That's why I start my own business. But other people have different skills that fit perfectly into that. And there's nothing against that. It's just, you got to eventually figure out where you fit.
I agree with you, and I'm curious to see if those skill sets change as work changes with remote and with everything we have going on. If you don't mind me asking, like, I can name someone on my side. Who do you know plays the game the best? You got somebody who call out that plays that game?
There's a guy, Jim Hoppy. I'll
He's
tell you right now,
yeah.
the guy, there's Jim Hoppy and Jim Lippy, actually, two Jims. Jim Lippy is the guy who came on board when we started Thrive. We grew it to a certain point, and then we brought in a director. I hired a director of business development, Jim Lippy, and then he took over as CEO. So we kind of pushed out our original CEO. Jim took over as CEO, and then he's the one who kind of brokered the relationship with Staples. Jim, like I've rarely come across somebody who can play that game as well as he was able to play it, right? What he did, he protected me for a while from the big red machine, because like he knew that if he really unleashed me and really had me talk to the executives, that I would burn the house down. But he was able to play both sides, and ultimately he was the one who fired me, but it wasn't him. He was the messenger. But he's done an incredible job being able to be the middleman of putting all the pieces together, not necessarily doing a ton or being the expert at anything in particular,
Yep.
but being able to really know where the pieces fit and how to bring the smart kids together, type of thing.
It's interesting because it's an interesting to wonder if, as things change and become more customer centric, there's also the politics within corporate change as well. And I think the answer is yes, but it probably takes time. It's
Yeah.
what the problem is with the politics. It's the people. What I've learned, I think maybe you agree with this, is the people who hold the power sometimes lost the skill set, and they protect their skill. They protect the fact that they lost their skill set, almost like a dictator stays in power forever, by making it political. Change is scary.
Well, change is, and I think, but that's the cool thing about, I think, what happens with COVID, right? I mean, silver linings all over the place, in my opinion, with COVID, which, it forced a lot of companies to re-examine what they thought was their model, right? And it was a forcing function for them to say, holy shit. And now you have, like, let's just use my little tiny world in training, right? I mean, I had remote training. I delivered remote training all the time, not all the time, but, and I thought it was actually a better, because, when we did on site, it was one day on site. I'd come in, I'd do my whole thing and whatever. But then, one data dump day, right, is 2 months later, 3 months later, see you later. So we would do remote, and it was 3 2-hour sessions spaced out over the course of a couple of weeks with reinforcement and stuff like that. I thought it was actually a better form of delivery, but everybody was used to on site. So if I was going head to head with another training organization and they were proposing an on-site session, super high engagement, and I was promoting remote, they would always go with the on-site, as long as the pricing was similar, right? And so okay, so that's what I did. I did on-site. COVID comes, rips it all apart. Now remote. Now I think it's a better form of delivering training. And I hope we never go back to on-site when it comes to this type of stuff. Because I just think this is a better environment. And think about all the companies who used to say, oh, you can't sell $1 million deals unless you're in front of the client, right?
Everybody.
Like everybody, the assumption was that everybody, like you had to be in front of the client, you had to schmooze them, you had to take them out to dinner if you want to sell that multi-million-dollar deal. And literally overnight, companies figured out how to sell multi-million-dollar deals remotely. Like overnight, there wasn't an option. So it's not like everybody said, oh shit, I can't do this. They said, oh shit, I got to figure out how to do this now. And they adapted. And those companies that are adapting and are agile enough to re-examine and always be testing new approaches and trying to figure out what's in the market and admitting that they don't, and leaders who admit they don't know everything, but they'll figure it out. Those are the ones that are going to win. Any company right now that's sitting back and hoping it goes back to normal is already lost, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree with you. I'm like, I no reason for it to go back. I think it should be a hybrid model. I'm sitting in a big office here. Great. Like, I'm not going to get rid of this office. I get rid of one floor. As we triple double, I'm going to keep the same size. If people want to come here, great. Some people come 1 day a week. Some people come once a month. Some people come never. Right. And some people are here every day. And it creates the right environment for the right people.
I fully believe it. I same thing. I was thinking 10 years ago that virtual realities, I mean, I was way off as far as the timing is concerned, but there's no question it's coming. You ever seen the movie Ready Player One?
No, it sounds like I like it.
Yeah, you'll like it. So it's the whole concept. And this is, unfortunately, this is where I believe a lot of the world is going to. And it basically, we've ruined the planet, right? There's shit everywhere. And it's like Biff in Back to the Future 3, right? He's sitting up in that huge ivory tower and everybody else is slumming it, right? So rich get richer, poor get poorer. And these pretty much everybody, middle class is gone and whatever. And Ready Player One is they all basically go home to their shitty little house or their trailer and they put on this virtual reality and they're whoever they want to be. And that's really their world. And
I know it. Oh yeah. I saw this. This was right? with Gerard Butler.
Nope, not no. No. It's a different one. Yeah,
you don't know what I'm talking about too, right?
I think so. I don't know.
He's an RV guy where like people are patrolling him. I don't know. Oh yeah, this is Steven Spielberg movie you're talking about, 2018. Ready Player One.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it's one of those things where if you think about it, like let's put it this way, let's kind of macro it out versus training for a second. You got this kid who's like a 13-year-old kid, right? Who's like maybe a little bit overweight and a little pimply face or whatever it is, goes into school and gets picked on every fucking day, like gets wailed on, right? And that kid then comes home and puts on his Oculus goggles and all of a sudden is this big stud football player, has, girls and cars and money and bling and all this other stuff. And he's a baller in the in that virtual world. What the world would you rather live in if you were that
virtual
kid?
World
All day long. So it's just a matter of time. And I think also, I think this COVID thing has accelerated that as well, because all these kids went from face-to-face learning, sitting in a classroom, to now everything's remote. Everything's virtual. They're all playing games virtually. They're all doing everything else. So we're moving in that direction, no question about it. I hope that the training world catches up before the world goes virtual. I think there's going to be that evolution of it where we kind of dip our toe into it a little bit. We're already there, but then training, to your point, we ship Oculus goggles and I'm standing in front of a class just like, if I want to go to Hawaii and we want to do a training in Hawaii, all right, everybody, let's go to Hawaii, right? Let's flip this section.
It's so ideal because it is so time consuming and costly to build a training department in-house. And it's so funny because, there's a few points to talk about. So like, I think that's going to happen. I'm all about it. I'm supporting it. I created salestransformation.com, which is going up to promote this kind of stuff because I think that's the future that we live in. And it's also just logical and it's more efficient. But like, for me, even I look at our business models and some people, it's interesting how some companies get called outsourcing. Some are called agencies, some are called trainers, some are called your lawyer, some are called your accountant, right? And I look at the term and I'm like, this is weird because you immediately think outsourcing means you're sending jobs to India when most of the call centers are in America already to begin with, right? So it's actually American jobs. And then it's this concept of like, I talk to SaaS leaders and they're like, we don't outsource. And I'm like, your whole business model is SaaS, software as a service, meaning you don't need to build it inside because we have it, pay us a monthly service. So you don't buy what you sell. Right. And then it's like, if you literally go to Costco to buy your vegetables and instead of planting them in your backyard, you're outsourcing, right? Yep. I know about your business model from a high level. I know what the on-site training is. I know what the recurring training is. I know I know that you recently built the YouTube for sales professionals, which I love, which is amazing because anybody who's not investing into their own education is just going to lose. It's just the bottom line. I guess I would ask, technologies like Gong and Chorus and other recording devices, have they improved your ability to deliver coaching and measure the results?
Not for me, but for my clients. So, our model is, there's a difference, like you said, about outsourcing and the different ways that people, agencies, those type of things. There's also a difference between, training and consulting. uh, and coaching, right? So I definitely lean more on the training side of the house, where I'm kind of like the grandparents, right? I come in, I play with the kids, and I bounce.
Yep.
And then I think the where the rubber hit the road and where most organizations fail miserably is that frontline manager reinforcement, right? Because those are the parents, those are the people that should be working and coaching and doing all the right work. And I work with them to teach them how to coach their employees. But since I'm not the manager holding them accountable, looking at their results, most reps will take coaching, but whether they apply it or not from us, I have no control over that. Whereas a manager should be putting those metrics in place, right? So I've very purposely gone the training route, not the consulting route.
Well, you're also specializing in what you do best. Yep. And that's for me, that gives me comfort, right? Because yep. I think it's especially in our industry, you can't be the best if you're doing several motions.
Nope.
Right. So you said it very nonchalantly, but I played the kids and I dropped them off, but no, you specialize in the area that you do best, right? Which is good. That makes sense to me. I brought up Chorus and Gong because I think if it's done right, they can be tools that help us transform sales, right? There's a gap.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's a gap. That's fine. I hope that gap closes, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of these organizations, I also think, failed to invest into it's interesting because like a lot of these companies that we work with, we talk to, there a lot of them are funded with VC money, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know all the deals, but a lot of it is based on growth, right? Growth rate.
Sure.
However, they'll always ask you your customer lifetime value, right? And mm-hmm. that's a big thing, but they're not really. They're almost going to market with this old school, predictable revenue model. They know that customer retention matters. They know it's changed, but they're not giving the authority for companies to create these channels that grow with partners. And it's really a shame because if you look at like NetSuite, which mm-hmm. was bought by $8 billion from Oracle, even though, Larry Ellison already owned 49%. It was easy for them to be like, hey, we're a financial engine, therefore accountants are our partners, Mm-hmm. But I think in our space, when it comes to sales transformation, we haven't united in a way where it's like you go to us because we are the glue between these processes. And it's almost sold as like, if you can't do it yourself, there's always option B, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of
fast. That why in the world, if you just created, let's say, a calendar tool, why would you be good at coaching?
Yeah. No, I think I think that I see that as a huge challenge because I'm a big, believer in specialization and get really good at that thing. But the problem is a lot of these platforms, right, is it ends up being a point solution that then gets acquired by a platform, right? I think a Salesforce, I think a Salesloft, right? You can get to a point where you are very successful as a business doing one very specific thing, but then you're either going to get acquired or you're going to get eaten up by somebody else because, for instance, people are so sick of I got my tech stack, I got 700, things in my tech stack. They all kind of do something overlapping, but I need this one because perfect example, like Gong and Salesloft, right? Like Salesloft, Gong has done a great job, but Salesloft has something similar, right? And Salesforce does something similar to Salesloft is they'll create something on their platform that is like 70 to 80% as good as the point solution, mm-hmm. right? And people are now shifting towards, okay, yeah, I love that point solution, Gong, whatever it is, because it's so good, but it doesn't, I don't want yet another platform. So I'll take a less quality thing as long as it plugs in and it's seamless to, my experience, if you will, right? And so I think it depends on really what you're trying to accomplish as a business.
To add to that, I look at Facebook groups very often, pretty active with social. And I would say that like people complaining about the raising price of it's not Drift, it's the other chat, Intercom, right?
Intercom, yep.
It's like so often I see like, yo, Intercom just doubled my price. Like, what's another solution? You know, and that comes back, in my opinion, to the VC money, right? Because now all of a sudden your value to cost ratio gets weighed off because you got to pay back investors a 10x investment.
Oh, yep.
And then they come
That's why I
back.
never want. That's why I never want VC money. I personally never wanted VC money because I don't want a boss, and I don't want somebody telling me how to grow my company. Now, I'm also 45 years old. I've kind of sold a company. You know, I'm not financially free at this point by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm at a different stage of my life than some other people, or I have different priorities, right? So if you want to go big or go home and get that big pop and go for it, then yeah. But then you have to expect that you're going to be told what to do. And I think the challenge with that is that so many VC backed companies that I see are doing things, again, going back to just doing what they're supposed to do because that's what everybody else does. So for instance, you know, these you know, events, these remote events, these conferences and this stuff, like, I don't want to call anybody out, but we're working with some partners that have put, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars into this 3-day event with special guests and, you know, and paying top dollar for talent and all this other stuff. And they get 1,000 people to register for it, 400 people to show up to a 1 hour talk by like Baller said X, right? And like my team, like we drop a webinar, like we come up with an idea for a webinar for next week, and we put a little bit of social and have some fun with it, and you know, are pretty authentic with what we're trying to accomplish. And we get 2,000 people to sign up and 1,000 people to show up, and we spent, you know, grand total maybe a couple $100 to put it on. So it's like you have this, again, going and doing what I'm supposed to do, predictable revenue. I'm supposed to have SDRs, BDRs, AEs, inside. Fuck that noise. I think the predictable revenue model it has to explode because it's not customer centric at all. Nobody wants to be handed off 5 times before they actually have a conversation with somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about. And it's great for organizations to scale, but it's miserable from a client experience.
Let's be real. People were buying Salesforce.
Yeah.
Such volume that you freaking needed SDRs.
Yeah. You did.
It create a new way to sell it. That product it changed everything. You know, there people were going for on-site CRMs, and it was like a no-brainer. The signups are coming in, and now everyone else plans. Well, sorry, everyone else's business is not as irreplaceable as Salesforce, right?
No. The customer experience is everything. And I think it was Corporate Executive Board that put out this stat that 53% of purchasing decisions is impacted by the selling experience. Like, so in the other, and check this out, company/brand impact is 19%, product service delivery is 19%, and value/price ratio is 9%. But 53% of the purchasing decision is impacted by the sales, the selling experience. So I'm a huge believer that, you know, and it's probably not in the short term here, but midterm, long term, that we are going to move towards sales reps going back to full cycle sales and actually having more of a customer success spin to them than a sales spin to them. And also SDRs are going to roll up under marketing and operations and be part of ABM and all the, right? And so that role, the SDR role, is no longer going to be a feeder system for sales. Yes, some will obviously come out of it that have that sales DNA in them, but we're going back to full cycle sales surrounded by ABM and driven inbound to high level customer service. Because if you think about it this way, like that's what always blows my mind. All these companies that spend millions of dollars on their ABM and their, you know, target marketing and all this other stuff to drive super high quality inbound leads. You're telling me that the first person that you want that person to talk to is a 22-year-old SDR wet behind the ears who's going to ask them BANT questions? Like if you're even close to the corporate executive board on the, you know, challenger sale, by the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% of the way through the sales process, whatever that number is. I don't really care, but it's an arguable that people are more educated by the time they come to us. They didn't just click on our website and say, gee, what's this? I hope I get a call today. They were like, nope. They looked at it, they educated, and they said, I want to learn more information. So you're somebody who's already 50, 60, 70% of the way through the sales process, and you got a sales rep following a sales process that forces them all the way back to step one, qualifies them, then flips them to an AE who drones through basically more qualification, then brings in an SE who's going to qualify them again and to give them some canned piece of shit demo. When they would have just, you could have cut out all those pieces and done a really nice, like, you know, how-to document on how to fucking, you know, videos.
Time you should meet an SDR, and obviously they're going to be different, but it's it's almost a capacity and volume thing. And instead of qualifying people, it's much different if it's like, what industry are you in? And I'm trying to match an AE that has worked with people in your space and knows it well. It's much different than like, are you the right person? I think
Right.
qualification is much different, and it feels much different from a customer if the questions are much geared towards like how you can help me. And then, am I going to talk to somebody with expertise in that field? Feels a lot better than like, are you the right person? Do you have the budget? Do you have the timeline you need? Right. Yeah. That's not a good experience. I think, and that the only time that should happen is if, sorry, right now, all our AEs are busy handling other clients. So you're going to speak to a junior rep that will help expedite your interaction when the time comes when it's free. Mm-hmm. And it's like there for value, being like, since someone's waiting, since there's a 30-minute wait to ask the AE, now we'll ask you 5 questions. I'll make sure that your experience with that AE will be shorter. Like that's something that's rolling around in my head. We focus now on helping our future customers of our clients with their digital transformation, because we sell a lot of SaaS products. And it was a big transformation mindset, going from, we help, B2B companies generate qualified meetings and pipeline, because just saying that is really just jumping into the whole acceleration mode we got going on, where it's like, we can do things faster, and right. It's so far away from quality, and it breaks everything, because right. If you get the wrong appointment with the wrong person, you're gonna have a bad onboarding experience. You're gonna have a negative review. You're gonna have wasting their time. And so it's like ironic how we're taught. And then I look at your organization, and I think what you're really doing is you're actually helping the future customers of your clients. You're not actually helping your clients. You're helping the future customers have a better experience, because you just said it. 56% say it's the sales experience. Mm-hmm. That data right there is real, and it's measurable. And if you can get it down to 30%, you made an impact. Your education is very much educating the future leaders, right?
I told you. So this is, a couple things, but I did a training a little while ago, and, I was in front of 200 kids and whatever, and got to the Q&A section, and I'm standing in front of Morgan, and I actually did this keynote together. And this one kid raised his hand. He goes, John, because I put my logo slide up there, and he's like, look, you train a lot of our competitors, man. He goes, if you're training all of us and our competitors on the same content, like, how do we differentiate? And my answer to him was 10, 60, 30. And I said to him, I go, look, 10% of you, because he was like, what do you mean? I go, 10% of you in this room are going to take what I tell you to do, execute it at the highest level, and you're going to excel. 60% of you in this room are going to do something different because it's easy and it makes sense. 30% of you ain't going to do shit different. So the question isn't how many people can I train? The question is what percentage do you want to be in? And unfortunately, I believe that the majority of this world, 80%-ish, and I'll be generous with that, are sheep. They just want to be told what to do. They want to do their thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you really want to excel, there's no silver bullet for shit. There's no perfect thing. You know what I mean? Like, you got to work your ass off and figure it out. And so for the people that care, to your point, those are the people that I'm trying to connect with. I could give a shit about, like, when I do a training, I tell people straight up when I do a training, now that we're doing them on Zoom, I tell them, look, if your camera is on right now, if your camera is not on right now, then I am not training you, period. No. I hope you're paying attention and feel free to ask a question, but I could give a shit about anybody who's not on screen with me right now. And it was the same thing when I trained in person. If you were in the back of the room on your laptop, checking your emails, doing that thing, I could give a shit. At first, I really cared. At first, I was like, oh my God, like, no, you have to learn this because it's really transformative and all this other stuff. And now I'm like, look, if you don't care, why should I? Yeah, I only care about the people that do.
Questions.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, you gotta get, I call it the give a shit factor all the time. You have to give a shit. And if you don't give a shit, then get out of my way.
John, I'm happy that we did not talk about prospecting or any of the things that we talk about all the time, and we just had a friend chat. I appreciate you being on the show. And if anybody wants to reach you, where can they find you?
Yep. John at jbarrows.com. Hit me up, or John M as in Michael Barrows is my handle on Instagram, and then all over LinkedIn. So those are the places you can hit me up. I appreciate it.
Don, let's keep the transformation alive, man. And I appreciate the chat, man. Have a good day.
Likewise. Thanks, Amir. Cheers.